Good evening, Augustonians. Welcome to Lit Friday, a monthly digital program from the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, or as we like to say, AWAKE, where we converse with Black writers, thinkers, and artists. If you are new to the series, my name is Jessica Lanay, Literary Curator at AWAKE and the host of this program. I am broadcasting to you from my Boom Concepts residency at Alloy Studios. A big thank you to Daryl Kinzel and Anquinique Winfield for the support and the care. Before we begin, or definitely forget, it is heavy on my heart to acknowledge the horrendous decision of the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. The overturning of Roe versus Wade is anti-life, it is anti-Black, and a gross violation of human rights in this country. It is important to preserve choice for all peoples as much as possible. And this is what Lit Friday is about: conversation, acknowledgement, and sharing information through those conversations, which we will continue to do. Please check on the women, femmes, and birthing people in your life. Make sure that they are okay and that they have the support that they need at this moment. I will be back with you again next week for our program Truth Sayers, another opportunity that the center provides for speaking truth. Truth Sayers Speaker Series is an ongoing program bringing today's preeminent speakers and artists to the center to reflect on current events and share unique and thought-provoking material in hopes of inspiring racial awareness and understanding between people. On June 29th at 7 p.m., as a part of the Truth Sayers series, I will be in conversation with Robert Jones Jr., cultural critic, creator of the Son of Baldwin blog, and National Book Award finalist for his novel, The Prophets. Get your tickets so you can join us for that conversation. On July 16th, we have AWC Community Day, and the theme is STEAM. If you are unfamiliar with STEAM, it is an update to STEM, which means science, technology, engineering, and math. We get STEAM when we add the A for art. Mae Jemison, the first Black woman to travel to space, will be with us for the event. Register online as soon as possible. And as we always find things to celebrate, this Lit Friday, we're celebrating many things, an extended celebration of Juneteenth, of course, as well as our birthday. We're turning 2 years old, and we had our first session with artist and poet Vanessa German and poet Yona Harvey. Today, we are also celebrating Danyel Smith, a writer of many genres, and her latest release, Shine Bright, a very personal history of Black women in pop. And if she doesn't mind me saying so, we are also celebrating her birthday, which is yesterday.
It's true.
I'm here to tell you firsthand that in my life of reading, this is one of those books, and I'm gonna show it to you. This is beautiful cover. This book made me laugh, it made me cry, I called my mother, it made me feel deeply connected, and again, it made me feel seen. And it's critically honest, and it is also sincerely inspiring. And more about Danyel, she is an award-winning journalist and the author of Shine Bright, A Personal History of Black Women in Pop from One World Random House, came out April 2022. Danyel is also host of Black Girl Songbook, an acclaimed Spotify podcast that centers the sounds and stories of Black women. Danyel's career has been laser focused on Black creatives making brilliant things. She has interviewed everyone from Whitney Houston to Janet Jackson to Simone Biles to Beyoncé. Danyel's CV includes being a producer and writer at ESPN, a Knight Fellow at Stanford University, and an Arts Fellow at Northwestern's Medill School of Journalism. She was editor of Billboard and the first woman and first Black person to serve as editor-in-chief of Vibe. She has written 2 novels, More Like Wrestling from Crown in 2003, and Bliss, also from Crown in 2005. And Danyel's recent work appears in the New York Times Magazine and at NPR. Her beloved second hometown is Brooklyn, but Danyel is a proud Oakland native now living with her husband, Elliott Wilson, who's also a photographer in Southern California. So thank you for spending time with us, Danyel. We are honored and flattered, and happy birthday.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. It's lovely to be here and to be a part of this amazing program. It's lovely to be here the day after my birthday. But I just wanted to say real quick, my husband, Elliott, is he's a journalist, and he's a, he's the chief content officer at Tidal and a podcast host himself. I have seen his photography, and he would be happy to know that you thought that he was a photographer. And I will definitely...
It's brilliant works. It's brilliant
I'll
work.
pass that along to him though, for sure.
No, but we should be correct about all the things we do.
Yes.
So I'm excited you're going to share with us from Shine Bright.
Yes, I'm so pleased to be reading. I'm so happy and honored that you asked me to read a bit from my new book. The book means the world to me, and the idea of reading anything that I've written at any place that has the name August Wilson attached to it is a massive and complete honor. So hello, everyone. I'm going to read a bit from a chapter I wrote called Stephanie Mills and the Wiz. And I wrote a big chapter about it because, one, I think that Stephanie Mills is she has one of the most distinctive voices really in the history of rhythm and blues and pop music. Mm-hmm. Stephanie Mills has created for us in her song Home, that we all love so much, a new American standard.
Yes.
Pretty much anyone that sings it after her always sings it in her vocal arrangement, and is always going for Stephanie's amount of emotion, the intense amount of emotion that she brings to the song. When I think of home, I think of a place where love's overflowing that we all know from our beloved The Wiz. So let me just jump in really quick. I'm not going to go too long, but let's meet Stephanie.
Yes, let's meet Stephanie. Thank you.
I'm quoting her. Till this day, I think The Wiz is the biggest thing that has happened in my career. Even though my albums have been successful, one of my goals, is still to make one of my albums that big. Stephanie Mills to Angela Stribling of BET, 1989. During the late 1960s, a Black Juilliard-educated piano prodigy named Charlie Smalls worked on the road with artists like Queen Esther Merrow and Sammy Davis Jr. At the same time, a white ad producer and comics writer named William F. Brown was easing into the life of a playwright. There was also a sometime actor, Another World, and radio executive named Ken Harper. He'd been nursing a big idea. Harper went to Smalls and Brown with a suggestion that they adapt The Wonderful Wizard of Oz for an all-Black cast incorporating Black slang. They took a cherished all-white story about overcoming fears and turned it into one about the Black American dream of the home we never had. They did this to the tune of 7 Tony Awards on 8 nominations. The Wiz, a proof of Black humanity precursor to The Cosby Show 6 years later, was a mass pop product and was envisioned as such from early on. The Wiz, wrote an executive at 20th Century Fox, which had backed the show for the first option on a film version, is as Black as Fiddler on the Roof is Jewish. When The Wiz initially struggled, 20th Century Fox funded Wiz television commercials featuring Stephanie Mills and whites prominently seated in the audience. It was the second ever national campaign after Pippin for a Broadway show. And as would happen with the pilgrimages to New Orleans Essence Festival decades later, Black people planned vacations around seeing The Wiz in New York City. And when the show toured the States, grassroots support was organized and successful. There was a big push by producer Ken Harper to bring in the African-American community, says Dee Dee Bridgewater, who won a Tony for her role as Ada Pearl's sister, Glenda Goodwitch of the South. She said this in a 2015 NPR interview on Here and Now. Busloads of people, she said, from church groups and African-American organizations. Night shows in New York City were 50-50, Black, white, with many in the seats reporting The Wiz as their first Broadway show ever. In 1984, The Wiz toured Japan. The magnetism of Stephanie Dorothea Mills is central to it all. And as an aside, I should say, that is her actual given name.
Yes, what's
her middle name is Dorothea.
Yes.
Stephanie Mills is one of the most beloved and one of the most underrated Black women recording artists in history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I do get emotional sometimes because people just don't say it enough. But Mills put in years embodying the role of Dorothy, and while laying the groundwork for big Black-centered shows like Dreamgirls, Rent, and The Lion King, introduced an entire generation to Broadway. Mills had been releasing albums since 1974's Moving in the Right Direction for the first time, but it wasn't until her 1979, What You Gonna Do With My Lovin', that she made more impact as Stephanie than as Dorothy. In the 1980 follow-up, Sweet Sensation, included Never Knew Love Like This Before, which was a top 10 pop hit and won the Grammy for Best Female R&B Vocal Performance. By the time of I Have Learned to Respect the Power of Love, written by Angela Winbush and Renee Moore, Mill was deep in a zone of zealously intimate rhythm and blues. I think I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, I feel the kind of veneer of invisibility that falls upon like very accomplished Black women, as if once the accomplishment is made, there's a, predominantly white media that decides that it's not important to continue the conversation, right? Almost as if we gave you the award, why continue harping on about the work in and of itself?
Yes, it's something that I'm so glad that you say that. It's something that I go back to again and again in Shine Bright, is that in America and American culture, there are people who are continuously lifted up to genius level status. And I always give the example of just the Beatles and the Supremes.
Right.
We always talk about the Beatles. The Beatles are a very cool group. I love their music. But what rarely gets said is how the Supremes were battling them punch for punch at the top of Billboard's charts. Punch for punch. Also, I write about the Dixie Cups in Shine Bright, who also did the incredible thing of being a debut girl group from the projects of New Orleans, who bumped Love Me Do from #1 from the Beatles. And these groups, I mean, the Supremes do get some credit, they do. But if you even just count the number of magazine covers or documentaries or biopics, Beatles to Supremes, or John and Paul to Diana and Mary and Flo, there's just literally no competition. And it breaks my heart, and I'm happy to be laying it all out in Shine Bright.
And no competition with regard to the fact that even now, and especially back then, there is a decided looking away from the accomplishments of Black women and a decided capping of where they can have their exposure as performers.
Yes, exactly. I always, when I was writing about Simone Biles, because her accomplishments are so insane that there's not even room enough to list them in your regular everyday magazine profile. But I wrote a line that I go back to for a lot of women, is that people like to blow accomplishments off of Black women like they're dandelions. Like it's gonna make their wish come true.
Yeah, yes.
And it is consistent throughout history, through right now, even up to and including some of the biggest stars that we know about today. My book talks a lot about Mariah Carey and how so many white women vocalists who write their own music are religiously referred to as singer-songwriters. Mariah is rarely referred to as a singer-songwriter who has double-digit #1 pop hits and who has written every single song that she has ever released, unless it was an outright cover of somebody else's song.
Right.
And Mariah Carey is referred to as, oh, she's a diva. Oh, Mariah, she's a beauty queen. Oh, Mariah, she's a mess.
She's
oh,
a hard
Mariah,
worker.
she's a genius.
She's a genius. She's a hard worker.
She is a genius.
And I did see, as you spoke about, Stephanie, you say I get emotional. And it was one of my questions about Shine Bright, because there's a brilliant interweaving of your own autobiography with the biographies of these Black women geniuses and how their life reflects your own. And I wanted to know what the personal challenges were of aligning or interweaving your autobiography with their stories or some of the privileges.
Oh, well, sure. I mean, one, there's the technical challenge, which as a writer, as a creator, is something that I was so worried about taking on, but once I got into it, it was, I won't say the most fun ever, but it was just kind of like climbing a mountain. Like every time you get a little bit higher, even though it's cold and even though it's difficult, it's like, oh my God, but the view from up here is amazing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
I just wanted to do it well. I wanted it to be seamless. I wanted it to make sense. I pride myself on writing good sentences and paragraphs and pages and chapters. And so I really wanted it to sing. I did. That merge of biography and memoir. But then when you get to the part that is like, so now I have to think about myself really deeply. I have to think about my sister really deeply. I need to talk to my sister about who is truly my best friend in life. She's a witness to my life as I am to hers. I have to talk to her about it. My sister was indelibly encouraging. She was like, I can't believe that you haven't done this before, which was a huge lift to my creativity. But it was still very hard. Around the time, maybe the last year and a half, when I was really finishing the book, it took me 5 or 6 years. If my husband was here, he'd say 7 or 8 actually, but it took me 5 or 6 years to write the book. And that last year when I was really finishing it, you know, I had to be really intentional about my own mental health. I've been in counseling off and on and mostly on for the last 20 years or more. And I always we all go into counseling for different reasons. I went in this particular time with goals, very specific goals. I said, I want to be less emotional when I do public speaking, which as you can see, we're still working on that. And I said, I wanted to write my truth. I wanted to get at the fear of having written about it before. And the counseling, both with my actual counselor, many long conversations with my husband, my sister, and, you know, my fellow sister writers, a lot of them, and my brother writers too. We got there, man. We got there. And my editor, of course, who pushed it from the beginning.
Yeah, I love that there's the open dialogue about mental health when we're talking about writing. The way that genius is framed so much in American history has a lot to do with like stoicism and like overproductivity, right? But the real genius is being able to deal with yourself as a way to give the gift of yourself through your projects, right?
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think my magazine background helps so much with that. When you work at a magazine, I compare it to like working on a television series or a film. I've been editor-in-chief, but just because I'm the director, it doesn't mean that you don't have a cinematographer and a photo editor and a fashion editor. You don't have all the people that are writing the different stories that you then look at. At a certain point, my husband, who's a former magazine editor himself, he was like, you have to give this to people. Like this whole thing of sitting in the room and acting like you're just going to do this by yourself. And it's just like, no. And the feedback was sometimes difficult to hear, but sometimes it was amazing. More times it was amazing to hear. More times it was so encouraging. And even when it was like, girl, I don't know what you're talking about right here. Like, like whatever you're trying to say right here, you're not really saying it. Even when it was that kind of feedback, man, I'm not as sensitive as I was as a baby writer. anymore. Now, when I hear that kind of feedback, I see the challenge in it, and I love to try to rise to it.
Mm-hmm. So you say over and over again in your work, your work is to uplift the lives and accomplishments of Black women in music. I read you say you could scream for 12 hours a day and it wouldn't be enough to actually lay clear the paths that the work of Black women in the music industry have opened. And I'm a student of Black feminism. And for me, both the theory of Black feminism and the work of Black women musicians and singers are prescient, right? They're future telling. Through our music, we've been telling the world how to love us, how to respect us, how telling the world about our humanity in this life, and how to avoid like our current political situation that we're in, quite frankly, right?
Yes.
But since Phyllis Wheatley, we've been yelling and trying to say, this is what will come to pass if we are not aware of ourselves as a community. And I wonder what, in your opinion, keeps people from really listening to the prescience of Black women who are geniuses.
What really keeps them from listening? One of the reasons that so many refuse to or actively disengage from listening to Black women is because they've been trained to. They've been trained to. They've been trained to look at us talking and hear want, 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 want. And I think sometimes, because of our positions of intimacy with the dominant culture, being in the house, raising other people's children, I think the influence has always actually really been right there. And it's much resented also. And so I think as then over maybe the last 5 decades, as those spaces of intimacy, violence, just being close up around basically white folks is lessened. And I think on a spiritual, metaphorical, and even physical level, again, that is resented, it is deeply missed. You see so many books by white authors, many of them from the South, that remember the maids and the mammies and the doormen and the butlers with such affection, twisted affection. And I really think so many people of the continuing dominant culture really miss it. They don't want to hear from us from far away. They don't want us on the podium. They want us in their ear. They want to hear the gems while they watch you changing their children's diapers for free or for less than you ought to be paid, telling them how it really is. So then that can be basically snatched, rewritten, remixed, and spewed out as something from the dominant culture. This has been going on forever, and it goes on in music even now. It goes on in music since we was hollering from the fields to keep ourselves sane while working for free. So I really feel like when you say, well, why do people willfully misunderstand? Why do they not want to hear? To quote those younger than me, it's because they mad that we're free enough to say things away from them. And that we're also have the power that comes from that. If we're lucky, we are getting paid for that.
Yeah, if you're lucky, it's exactly.
It's a long resentment line, man. It's a long resentment line from 1619.
It's a long resentment line from 1619, and even before that, with the circulation of free Black people from Latin America, Cuba into the United States, which helped fuel things like the American Revolution, helped fuel things like the Civil Rights Movement, right? You know, Black folks, people of African ancestry in the Americas have been talking about human rights, liberty, and democracy under many different terms for centuries. And we've been putting it in our music for centuries, this idea of equality and recognition and conversation and sharing, which I think is, you know, the opposite of how power like works in our culture as well. But speaking of power, what I also love about your book and your work is that you always give credit where credit is due. A lot of your work, when you read the intro, when you read the book, it sounds like an acknowledgement in poetry, an acknowledgement in prose. You never let a name go by that you can credit with having given you that encouragement, that support or care. And you credited Tommy Tompkins from the Bay Guardian with urging you to tell your truth in one interview. And you have to be encouraged because at some point there is a fear, right? So as a young journalist, what were some of the fears or holdups that you had to work through? And how did you grow into knowing that your view definitively matters?
I'm so grateful to Tommy for that. And people have continued and continue to tell me that because I still have the fears. They're different as you get older, but you still have them. We always need those people in our life, professionally or personally, that just basically say, you're a good girl, keep going, you know? And I'm blessed to have those people. I'm blessed to have had the other kind too, who are also written about in Shine Bright. I definitely did not have the kind of childhood that was uplifting of creativity or accomplishment. And I carried that sort of shaky start into my career. That feeling of, well, is accomplishment good? Should I be striving for excellence? I think this is excellent, but is it actually? It's not, because no one's really told me so. It's just a fear, as much as I loved and continue to love to write, of just having the confidence of getting from the first word to the period at the end of the sentence. I don't take that for granted at all. Mm-hmm. So I had that fear of, just in my brain, of this thing that I'm thinking. I know that I can write it, but is it going to be okay? Is it going to be received? Is it going to sound good? Is it going to make sense? Is it going to do what I mean it to do? And that was work on my part and the part of really good editors that I've had, really good teachers, professors. I had one professor tell me one time when he gave me an A- on something, that's how my ego is. I'm like, A-.
Oh, me too.
What's the minus? What's the minus for? And he told me what it was for. It was clear that I deserved whatever it was. I can't even remember. But he said to me, it's Dr. Charles Muscatine of UC Berkeley. He's passed now. He said, I think you should concentrate less on that minus and more on the fact that I think that you can make a living at this.
Wow, that's important.
And I was like, what? I was in librarianship studies, which is listen, I think I would have done a good job. I just don't know that it was my destiny. If it weren't for librarians, though, I don't know that I would be here, which is why I was trying to go into that.
Mm-hmm.
But he was like, why are you in that? You need to be writing. And I think the way I remember that now, God, that's 40 years ago. I remember it like it was yesterday. And so I always like to remind people, say nice things. Say nice things with sincerity, because it matters, because we are so bombarded. People are so happy so often to say awful things or even sideways things, especially to creatives who seem a little bit outside of the norm, who seem like maybe they're wearing a weird shirt, or maybe they're staying up too late working on something, or maybe they're writing about things that seem a little like, should they really be writing about that? Like, say nice things, because the world is going to bombard them with no. And so say nice things.
I really appreciated and shine bright the moments of transparency when you're talking about being in very illustrious rooms and feeling awkward.
Oh, yeah.
And the vulnerability really resonated with me also as an individual, that sometimes in group situation feels, no matter how much I know the people who I'm speaking to, a little awkward. And sometimes,
Yes.
like you just said, that sense of separation breeds in people the inspiration to not say nice things sometimes.
It's true. And I find it odd, and I don't know if you experience this, but when I tell people that, like, oh my God, I don't want to go in there, I just don't know what I'm going to say to all these people, or even if it's a cocktail party sometime. And people are like, well, Danyel, you're so accomplished and sophisticated. I mean, how could you be nervous about something like this? Mm. And I say the truth, which is that's cultivated. It's cultivated. To those to whom it comes natural, God bless you. I admire you and you inspire me.
Deeply admired.
Yes, but it does not come natural to me. It is work, and it comes from work that I've done on myself, conversations that I've had with myself and with others, with professionals, to acknowledge the goodness in myself, to acknowledge the fact that I am welcome. I am welcome. But because so often as Black people and as Black women, as brown people, as people in general who don't just click with what continues to be referred to as the mainstream, which I don't even know that it is anymore. Because we are just so maligned passively and aggressively. Mm-hmm. It's very difficult to just get in there with your shoulders back and say, hello, everyone, I'm Danyel Smith. How are you today?
Yes.
Like it's a process. And I don't think that we should be quiet about the fact that it is.
I agree.
I don't think so.
So what would you say in your career was one of your most difficult moments? What was one of your most difficult moments? And what was one of your most blessed moments? Maybe they're the same one.
There's too many blessings. So I'll just name one of many. But one, I'm from Oakland, California. Oakland is the joy of my life. And when I say I'm from Oakland, I'm very clear about the fact that I am from East Oakland, California. East Oakland is a beautiful place. It's a wild space though. People used to say, if you're not from East Oakland, you really don't have any business being in East Oakland. But the town, as it's called, I love it. But by the time I was about 20, I knew that I had to leave, or I was not going to do the things that I was just beginning to form dreams about and plans about what I really wanted to do. But I was poor, so I could see no way out. It seemed to me that no matter how much I tried to budget or plan or ideate or work 2, sometimes 3 jobs, 2 jobs at an internship for free. The math wasn't mathing, okay?
Right.
It just wasn't, like, the plane tickets were not just forthcoming. And I was trying to figure it out. And then a gentleman by the name of Bill Adler, who was then the publicist for the group Run DMC. Bill called me and said, you know, there's a job open in New York as rhythm and blues editor at Billboard. You should go for it. And I was like, that's just impossible. I would never get that job. It's like my first thought. Right. He was like, first of all, you would. And second of all, I already told them they're a fool if they don't hire you. He was like, they're going to send you a plane ticket. They're going to put you up in a hotel for 2 nights in New York City. I had to do a phone interview, and then I made the phone interview, and they brought me out to New York. I got the job. I still remember leaving from San Francisco airport, and this was back before security. So I mean, like, all of my girlfriends were at the gate.
Yeah.
Blessing. Toughest time, one of the toughest, because there's been a lot of tough times. I was friends with Tupac Shakur in life. And his death, he was by no means a perfect person. His death, the violence perpetrated against him by law enforcement, that pain does not go anywhere. And I can remember at the time of his death, I would be asked all the, so often, can you write something about Tupac? Can you write something about Tupac, Danyel? You were friends with him. Can you write something about Tupac? And and I used to recuse myself about writing, from writing about him in life because I was biased. Plain and simple. And I wasn't comfortable at that point in my career writing about my bias. So I just said, I can't do it. And then like a year and a half afterward, there's a book being put together by Vibe magazine, a collection of essays and photographs about or centering Tupac Shakur. And I was asked to write the introduction to it. And I said to myself, it's time. I had great editors. Rob Kenner was one of them. And I wrote a piece that's still near and dear to me. It's archived at the New York Times. It was excerpted at the New York Times. It was one of the hardest things I've written in my entire life. And what's so wild about that is that I find that those things that are so hard to write, that are so difficult to get through, that require so much back and forth with an editor, that requires so many rewrites and refinements and these kinds of things, because not all of my work requires that. Not all of it. Sometimes it's like lickety spit. It's like, oh, look at you, Danyel, you wrote that, girl. But
no,
sometimes it's like,
this.
Right? But sometimes it's like, girl, where is the line connecting these paragraphs? Like, what is your thesis? Have we stuck to it at any time? Did you write an outline? But those pieces, especially when you're blessed with an editor, and it's so terrible how editors are so swamped because of all the layoffs at media companies, that in so many cases, they're unable to give the kind of time to young writers as was given to me. But when you have someone who's reading your work and says, you know something, I just really think that you're trying to say something that you're not actually saying. Do you want to try to articulate that just vocally to me? And then I articulate it vocally with some prodding. And then once you articulate it vocally, then now I can try to articulate it at the keyboard. And then you refine that, and it's hard, and maybe you're crying through it. But listen to me, that's the work that works. So writing that thing about Tupac, and I could think of other pieces that mean a lot to me like that. Those are the pieces that, man, it's just hard. It's just really hard. But then at the end, you just feel like it's that blessing of like, well, it was worth it. I'm at the mountaintop.
Mm-hmm. The view from here is amazing.
The view from here is amazing. There is a feeling, and if there are writers listening right now, you know that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Something I tell people when I'm teaching writing to do all the time is to, when you feel it's done, give it to your trusted person. It doesn't even have to be your bestie, just your trusted person to read your work aloud to you.
Yes.
Because you will hear all of the places where it's not singing.
Mm-hmm.
You will hear they're not going to put in the commas for you in their voice that you did not write. You're going to hear the words that you lean on too much, so much so that they start to have less meaning.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can see where, if I am going to be using this word over and over and over again in this paragraph or on this page, let me do it strategically so that people can see and feel what I'm doing. But even more than all that, you're going to hear where it sings,
Mm-hmm.
because they're not going to be able to help themselves as they're reading it. They're going to start to feel it. They're going to start to read it with like a little bit of a louder voice because, oh my God, like this is good right here, girl. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
Oh, yes. And it's fine. And sometimes I read it out loud to myself, but you will cover for yourself and add in edits that aren't on the page. If you have a trusted person, always give it to them and have them read it aloud. It's a treat, it's painful, but it's always helpful.
It is always helpful. I want to zoom out a little bit now that we're just talking about Black writing, right? Being Black, being writers. And I think one phenomena that we're seeing with the media, especially since Trump's presidency, is that, you know, there have been recent massive buyouts of newspapers and media, you know, websites, print, and a lot of local newspapers have disappeared, right?
Yeah.
Now we're relying more on, you know, national kind of syndicates to give us our news. And speaking of truth and how journalism has entered into such a question of itself, and I think I do have it written down. You say, journalism is the first draft of history. You said this in an interview, and I had to write it down. And just with all of that, with thinking about how the economics affect the field, what does that mean for young Black writers and journalists now who are interested in following a path similar to yours?
I hate that it's harder now. It was supposed to be easier. Because it was hard for me. It was supposed to be easier for those that came after. I go through my career, I used to always say, and I really probably have to stop saying it after the events of today with the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
I like to say that every generation gets a little more free. I don't know right now if that's true, but I do know this. Those younger than me are stronger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys can do the work. It'll be a different type of work than I and my cohort did and do. As a young journalist, I was rowdy. No one was giving hip hop or Black music the respect that it deserved at all. Every day I was bombarded with media accounts of rap being a fad, of hip hop being an art form that wasn't an art form, that it wasn't going to be ever as important as rock and roll, that it was just a killer music. And I don't mean killer in like, that's a killer skirt.
Right.
I mean, it was even, you know, some of my best friends and colleagues would say, I can't believe you're going to a rap show. I'm like, have you seen the recent news about the rock shows in the 70s and 80s? where people are getting trampled, but I can't go to a rap show without seeing law enforcement on horses, mounted police, like there might be a riot. Like, it was awful. We had to fight that every day. Fight to get anybody. Anytime I was working at a publication that was white centered, mainstream centered, the fight for any Black cover, any Black space in the publication. And this is at the best of them. But it worked to a degree. Beyonce, as a member of Destiny's Child, couldn't be on the cover of Vogue. They wouldn't have her. They didn't like putting Black people on their covers at all. Now, fashion magazines are dependent on Black faces to sell at the newsstands. So that's the work, that's some of the work that we did. Yours is different. I don't know that we have to get back to anything because I don't know that the models were that amazing to begin with. But it really does fall. And I'm gonna say, y'all, to do the work. And I'm tired. I know you guys are already tired too. But the work has to be done. I don't know if the answer is to start things. I don't know if the answer is to infiltrate things. I don't know if the answer is to reclaim paper. I don't know if the answer is to continue to dominate at TikTok in other ways. I don't know the answer, but I think that you all do. Even if right now you don't know that you know. I think it's in you. Matter of fact, I'll go out and say, I know it's in you. I talk to you all. I talk to my niece and nephew, 17 and 20. They are the bright spots. This world is awful in so many ways right now. My God. My God. Maybe it's love, but I look at them and I see that you all are going to know how to do the work and you're going to do it.
Thank you. And a continuance from that conversation, I want to share a quote from Shine Bright.
Okay.
There are so many quotes from your book. I could just keep giving them to you and giving you passages and then asking, questions about them. But one that hits me hard, as I'm a Black woman from the South, is this. And the quote opens, as just about all of American pop music, regardless of genre, is based in the blues, it's no coincidence that the state of Mississippi boasts more Grammy winners and Grammy Hall of Fame inductees than any other state in the Union, and is home to the only Grammy museum outside of Los Angeles. Blues come from actual blues. After fingers were chopped and other tortures completed, the couple would be thrown on a fire and allowed to burn to death. This terrorism and the culture of fear that surrounded it is in the heat of Mississippi's actual and musical blues. And there's this quality in your book and in the music, and you're talking and it's refracting back and forth about how to carry joy despite the nightmare. Finding the beautiful vignette and what seems like it's not going to end, and being able to weight it above the heaviness of the horror. It's this levity. It's in your writing. It's in the music of the women you've cited. It's there. And I wanted you to talk more about that levity for us. How do you manage as a writer to always be overtaken by the joy, despite all of the awful that is true?
I come by it honestly, I think. I became an adult at a very young age, like a lot of us. And I just made some decisions at a very young age, maybe 11, 12, that I would not be controlled by my environment. and that there was something beyond that I could create for myself that would bring me some happiness and safety and peace.
Peace.
And in those words is where joy is growing, right? It's not easy. It's not easy. It wasn't easy then. It's not easy now. But I just have in me a will to not let the environment take me over. There's no way it's not going to affect me. There's no way it's not going to affect my work. But I'm not going to let it take me over. And when I say I come by it honestly, because I became an adult at a young age, I also come by it honestly because on one whole and entire side of my family, I'm the descendants of slaves, enslaved people. My ancestors were on a small Catholic plantation just outside of New Orleans. The other side of my family is Filipina, which we have our own thing over there too. Don't even act like we don't.
Absolutely.
But I'm far more identified as a Black person, a Black woman, a Black human on this earth, with all respect to my Asian ancestry. I think it's probably because I'm raised in America.
Mm-hmm.
But when I think about, and I think sometimes a lot of times we say we think about how hard it was for enslaved people. But my thing is, I literally think about the details of it. I've done research about the details of it.
Mm-hmm.
The couple that was very about voting rights, and how the Ku Klux Klan put a pipe bomb underneath their home, right underneath their marital bed, and they were blown to bits on their 25th anniversary. I think about, from the part you just read, of people just literally having their limbs, cut off, of people working barefoot and barehanded in places where they are like melting sugar, testing the heat of the molten sugar with their elbows and fingers.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say that that doesn't give me any right to feel bad about things in current day America and the world. But I do allow it to give me perspective. I will tell you that. I do, because it pains me to say, but those folks found joy. They did.
That's how we're
They found ways to translate their deepest pain and sadness and anger at the crimes committed against them, to give us the blues, and then to give us the rhythm and blues, and to give us jazz, to give us what was named disco, but it's nothing but just Black music, to give us the best of hip hop and rap, house music. I mean, this is all a translation of pain. It's what it is. Real, ugly, and nasty pain, which is why the rest of the world loves it so much, because they can experience it without experiencing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you say, how do I find my joy? I literally refuse to let it take me over. I refuse to have the ugliness of the day take over my spirit. No, ma'am, I will not. I'm not saying I'm not sad. I'm not saying I'm not mad. I'm not saying I'm not exhausted. I'm not saying I know I still have to work. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying, no, I was not born into this world to have nothing.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. And I want to thank you for that insight. And I think that that's something that we can just tattoo on our minds, right? Refuse the ugliness of the day.
Right.
That's the prompt, right? That's the prompt that we have from today forward until we get back what's rightfully ours as women and Black women and human beings. It's refuse the ugliness of the day.
Yes.
But you are, as a part of your joy, a multi-genre writer, nonfiction, fiction, reportage, interviews. How are they connected for you? How are they separate? And an example would be how different were the processes between writing your fiction work, Bliss, and Shine Bright.
It's harder to make up a story. I don't care what anybody says. It's harder to make up a story. Like, writing Shine Bright was so hard, but the facts are there.
Mm-hmm.
They're there for me to, interpret and move, but the facts are there. The timelines are there. The dates are there. People were born and they worked and then they, things happened and they passed or they're still here. It's there. Making up a story is difficult. It's hard. I may do it again because it's fun, but it's ridiculously hard. Writing for audio was hard for my podcast. Oh, I went in there so conceited. I went in there so full of myself. I just knew, I'm just gonna, my producers were like, ma'am, no. So I had to go back and learn. The last 3 years of doing songbook have taught me so much. But I think at the end of the day, my favorite is just really researching a person or persons deeply. If I'm lucky, but not necessary, talking to them and then trying to tell their story. Is really nothing like it in the world. It's really nothing like it in the world, especially for Black people, because everything is undertold. Everything is undersold. Everything is summarized. So much is summarized and not detailed. I refuse to write about Black people in summary. I refuse. So much of Black people's lives is written about whether or not they were first. There's a place and a space for that, and I admire it and celebrate it. It's not my work. I love to get into the details of Black people's lives, details of Black people's genius. I like to know where the bomb was placed. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Underneath those people's beds.
It revealed that someone had to go look for that information. These people had to go search for the vital record of their marriage. They had to ask somebody. They had to haunt their house. They had to put critical thinking into the harm of this couple fighting for their humanity. That's what the details reveal.
This is what it does do. This is what it does do. The Dixie Cups were known in New Orleans as the girls in the green dresses because they wore green dresses to all of their auditions and at all of their talent shows. I wanted to know, what was the story of the green dresses? Why are we in the green dresses? Their grandmother made them those dresses. They grew up in segregated Louisiana. They could only go into the store at certain hours of certain days when no white people were in the store and there was no white people serving them. The stuff was still too expensive. And they would walk by the store with their grandmother, and their grandmother would say, do you like that dress? And the girls would say, I mean, I guess, but we could never. The grandmother would say, I didn't ask you that. I asked you, do you like the dress? They said, we do. So the grandmother would just stand there and stare at the dress, come home, lay out newspaper, cut out patterns, fit it to each of the girls, buy the fabric that they could afford, very shiny, very cute, even made cummerbunds, did a whole thing, an overlaying of net. I want that information.
Mm-hmm.
In that information is ambition. In that information is hope for the future. That grandmother was born in slave times. It's like, can I know that? Because I certainly know how Bob Dylan's hair falls in the precise curls that it falls in. There were times when people knew what kind of mousse and pomade and whatnot that Elvis ran through his hair. Why can't I know that about the Shirelles wigs?
Mm-hmm.
Because, honey, why can't I know that about the bouffants of the Ronettes? Why can't I know that? Why can't we all know that? Why can't that just be as much a part of our cultural conversation as what white artists do and how they present and everything that goes into making them the geniuses that they are? Why can't we know that about Black people? So that to me is such important work, and it's the most fun work, and it is the mission of the rest of my career.
So I have 2 more questions. And
okay.
I know, like I predicted before we started, we're going to go a little bit over, a little 5 minutes over. Because if I get these last 2 questions in, I'm going to do it, right?
Okay.
So in Shine Bright, you outline in your recollection of interviewing Whitney Houston, spending 3 hours at her house, playing with the Nerf ball. You talk about having to give a little intimacy to get intimate answers as an interviewer. Ooh. And as someone who interviews people often myself, yes. I know this exchange. It's a little opening your window of vulnerability. So an invitation in, like, come into me, because I want people to know really, really what you mean and really, really what you think, and I'm willing to share. Do you have a method of preparation for your interviews? And do you have rules while conducting them? And what does that sharing of intimacy mean to you in that process? Interviewing can get thick.
It's different for everybody, for each subject. As far as a method, I have to research ahead of time.
Yes.
I'm not that person that just wants to go in and have a la-di-da conversation with you and hope for the best. I make it a mission to not ask people questions about themselves that I should already know. Mm. And especially if it's an elder, someone older than me. No, it's disrespectful, I feel. But what I do like to do is say, like if it was me and someone was interviewing me, if I was interviewing me, then I would say, Danyel, I know you're from Oakland, but you moved to Los Angeles, didn't you? During elementary school, and I was reading something and it said that you grew up on High Point Street. What an optimistically named street. Like, were you aware of how optimistic and like uplifting the name of that street was when you were a kid, or did you even notice it at all? That's, to me, is a good question. If I'm stuck in the middle of an interview, I will always ask somebody the story of their middle name, which I already know. I will know their middle name. I interviewed Lionel Richie recently, and I asked him, he said, no one's ever asked me that before. There's no better compliment to me. And I don't understand how Lionel Richie is his age and no one has asked him the story of his middle name. He's a junior. The story is right there in front of you. He's a junior. I like to be prepared, but then you also have to be some mix, though. You got to stay loose. I think a habit I had as a much younger reporter was to have all my questions written down. And then as soon as the person, like if I said, so tell me about your elementary school. And they were like, well, it was this, that, and the third. And then it was a blue building. And then after that, Medgar Evers actually came to speak to us at our graduation. And then I would say, okay, so then tell me about your high school. And it's like, ma'am, they just told you that Medgar Evers spoke at the graduation. How are you not going to follow up on, like, did he say something that stayed with you? What did he look like? How long before, when did he pass? Like, in relation to when, like, but I used to not follow up. I used to look at my questions as like religious. No, man, and to be vulnerable, man, I'll say this. If you think you can play that game and not get caught up in it, you're not me. Because my thing is, I can't be fake. So me showing my vulnerability is actually me showing my vulnerability. It's not like a made up vulnerability. So if you're working with people or you're talking to a person that is, I don't know, wise in the ways of manipulation,
They're gonna know.
You need to be careful. I've gotten caught out there for sure. And you know, I'm in the middle of an interview and I'm like, okay, wait, no, I'm being played now. Let me regain control of this situation, at least to 51-49, me on the 51 side. Like, but then sometimes you have these amazing experiences where you show a little vulnerability, authentic vulnerability. And the person shows some themselves. See, a lot of times too, I think with people, and again, particularly with Black people and particularly with Black women, I'm not exaggerating when I say, even though it's hyperbole, no one asks us anything.
No, they don't.
They don't ask us anything. And in that Whitney Houston chapter, I talk about how I really wanted Whitney to talk about her relationship with Bobby Brown, which she was choosing not to do. And she knew what I was trying to get at. And she was just pleasantly adamant about the fact that that wasn't what she was here to talk about. She was here to talk about her music. That's hard to argue with. But what she did give me was, let me be Whitney for a minute. Do you know Lena Horne? Like, what do you mean, do I know her? I know her, not personally. Do you know Lena Horne? I was like, I don't, Whitney. She said, if you interview people, if you ever have an opportunity to interview Miss Horne, because you seem like you want to be in my business about what I'm doing in my relationship, if you really ever have the opportunity to interview Miss Lena Horne, you ask her about her relationship with Joe Louis. So I knew like the outlines of that relationship. And I read a little bit more, and of course it's awful. But never did I think that I would have the opportunity to meet Miss Lena Horne, which I did. It's very late in her life. She was so tiny. That's what I remember. The little hands were like little, just so tiny. And we were having a lovely conversation about music. And I was thinking, how am I going to ask this very elderly lady, because I think I was in my 30s, about something this personal? But I knew that she had gone on the record as saying that if there were to be a biopic of her, she would want Whitney Houston to portray her in that biopic.
Yes.
So that was my in. And I brought that up. She says, oh, she starts talking about Whitney with such love and affection. And then I mentioned to her that I had interviewed Whitney. She thought that was fantastic. And I said, it's really weird, but I'm paraphrasing from memory. I have it somewhere on tape. She said, it's really weird. I said, I was speaking to her and she brought you up. It was almost like a little message to you. Miss Horne's interested. I'm awkward though. How do you bring that up?
Yeah.
So I just said it. I said, Whitney Houston told me that if I wanted to better understand her, then I needed to ask you, if I was ever so lucky to interview you, about your relationship with Joe Louis. I was sweating. She said, that's an interesting message to get from Whitney. And her voice is like that, kind of low, Lena Horne's is. And she said, it's hard for me to talk about him. She said, because he's not a terrible person. He's a terrible person. He's not a terrible person. He had a hard way to go. He had a hard way to go being Black in America, at that time. She said, I will say this though, there are men that love women who have light around them. Mm-hmm. They love the women with the light around them. It's their favorite thing. They love it. She said, but the thing is, they love it because they just want to put it out.
Yes.
And I feel like even though Whitney Houston would not tell me any specifics really of consequence about she and her husband, Bobby, she sent me to Ms. Horne, and Ms. Horne brought me to the larger truth. Mm-hmm. Even though it took, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years between those two. So I feel like even though Whitney somewhat got the better of me because I didn't get from her what I thought I really wanted to get, Whitney sent me to where I really needed to be. And I just, I love it when it works out that way. I think everybody was vulnerable in their own way. Me, then Whitney for even giving that hint, and then Ms. Horne for not being offended by, and then for me recording it for posterity.
Yeah. So the last question is, what is one conversation with a Black woman that you have not been able to have, but you would do almost anything if it was possible to go have that conversation with her?
Oh, that would be Sade Adu, without question. That would be Sade Adu. I hope she hears me wherever she is in her. I write about it all the time, in her castle, in her Sade castle, somewhere in the sky, wherever she is, up there doing some smooth operations. She's such a superstar. She gives us so little, gives us so much. Oh man, you talk about a singer-songwriter, you talk about a voice so distinctive. There is never a time when you can hear Sade singing and you say to yourself, who is that?
No, it's always her. It's always her.
The turns of phrase with you, what did she say? Every morning is like Christmas, every night is like New Year's Eve. Mm-hmm. When I was young, I was like, if only your love is wider than Victoria Lake. I didn't even know what Victoria Lake was. I had to look it up. Like the videos, do you remember the mermaid? And do you remember her on the horse and always the ponytail, the red lip, like the way she is about her child.
My parents used to argue about who was married to her. My dad used to be like, that's your mom. And my mom would be like, yeah, that is your mom, but she's my wife. Like they would have these arguments over Sade, serious conversations.
Have to. Another one, genius is not attached as often as it should to her name. We talk about Adele a lot though, don't we? Don't we?
We do.
Don't we?
They ask me about Adele a lot. They ask me about my playlist and who's absent from it a lot. And I'm like, I have an answer for that.
Yes,
and Adele's I don't need to do to get that. I know who to listen to get that.
This is the thing, but my thing is, when we talk about Adele, and we should, can we put Sade in the context of that conversation? Mm-hmm. And can we do it really every single time? Because we should. Mm-hmm. Because before Adele, Sade is the person that sold the most records as a woman in the United Kingdom. Why isn't her name attached to Adele's in that way? I know why. Because she's Black.
Mhm. I want to thank you for your generosity, your knowledge, and the time we spent together. I learned so much. I want to remind viewers, come for Robert Jones Jr., June 29th, another brilliant, acclaimed fiction writer, critical commentator, and don't miss Mae Jemison, once in a lifetime opportunity, July 6th. Mae Jemison, the first Black woman in space, is going to be at the August Wilson African American Cultural Center. We have been blessed by you, and I want to thank you for sharing this moment with me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you to everyone at the center. And most of all, I want to say thank you, August Wilson, honestly. Thank you.
Thanks, August. We're thinking of you. Bye, everybody.